Okay, so today we're going to go over some new stuff to y'all. After watching the video, I hope you understand that a lot of the changes in the industry as I've grown with it, have come from not only lighting, but how our materials actually are affected by lighting. In fact, that's a lot of what we did. And we've come a long way even with that. We've had a lot of work done so we can make those materials even more compact and easier to use. So we're going to talk about that today, and we're going to talk about it inside of Unity. So let me open up exactly what we're talking about real quick. I'm going to take this away. I'm going to grab this object right here and go to our object in our chapel. We're talking about this mask right here. This is the first thing we're going to talk about. It's called a mask map. Now, to get into that, I want to go into here. This is what a mask map looks like. It's not that one there, but this is what a mask map looks like on if you just open it up in Photoshop. And it can be really confusing to people to understand what you're looking at. We realized a long time ago that what we put in our games that aren't albedo maps, anything but the albedo maps, are really just black and white maps. So, and that's really easy for the computer to understand 0 to 1, right? So if you say 0 to 1, 0 being black and 1 being white, then anything in between is a digit, and it's easy for the computer to figure out. So we look at something like this and we say, okay, so what is going on here? Well, let me show you what's going on here. This is where it came from. I just did an export of this trim texture and put it into Photoshop just so we could look at them. And I've exported it, and what we've talked about, that the height or that the metallic and the roughness maps are just telling the computer where it's shiny or not shiny, for example. So what we get when we look at the metal maps, and the way we used to do it, is something like this, right? Here's our metal map, and we can tell by the M the way I labeled it. And here, in this case, and for Unity, it's called our smoothness map. And it's, again, how sharp or reflective it is. This is how sharp the reflection is. Our metal absorbs how much of it or doesn't. And this is how much it shines back in your face. So what we did is, if we look at this map here, it's just like our normal map, right? Remember how our normal map is just the black and white textures and all three RGB layers? Well, we decided that we could do that same thing with pretty much every type of map, and we do. We just need to do it by hand, or we used to have to do it by hand, and now we do it by working inside of Substance, and we'll export it for you. In fact, there used to be a creator inside of Unity, but we aren't going to use that. So if I look at this and I go to the channels, just to give you an idea of what we're looking at, if it's white, it's 100%. If it's black, it's 0. So there is no green or red in this picture, but there is blue, because if we look at it, there's just blue, right? So let me do this. Let me take this and say X and put it here. And now there's just green because it's white where the green is and black everywhere else. Do this again, X, and then here to the red. And then we can do the middle, right? We can go to here, and then we get yellow, and we can go to here, and then we get white, because all three of them are 100%. So that's what pretty much we're looking at when we look at these strange maps. It's a bunch of maps pushed together making this master map. So the way that Unity has done it, and the way Unity does it, is it takes these three, or actually 4 channels, and puts a different type of black and white map in them. So this first one, and the RGB channels, obviously this puts it as an index because it's a separate piece, so I'm just going to modify this real quick to an RGB so we can see it. And then we're going to add a alpha channel too. What it does is it takes this, our channel is actually the texture that we're going to use for our metal map. Okay, makes sense. So what about the green channel? Well, the green channel actually uses our AO bake. So Control A and Control C, and we come over to here, and we go to the green channel, and we paste it. Okay, so now we're getting something closer, but not quite there yet. So then we go to the blue channel, and this is a cool channel because it's a mask. We aren't even going to use this one in this case, but we have another map called a detail map, which does a different normal set and a different highlight set and a bunch of different little cool things that we can then use this texture to mask out where it's on and where it's off. So usually detail masks are tiling textures. They're usually just really fine tiling textures that we can put over things. And then we use this mask texture to mask out where we don't want it. So what we can do in this case, we'll just select all and delete. And we'll just say, delete, and then say okay, because we're just going to take the first color right there so it's black. And then the alpha channel. The alpha channel on the substance is the texture that uses the smoothness map in our case. Not the roughness, because it's substance. So we come into the alpha channel and we paste in the smoothness map. And lo and behold, if we look at this and we look at the original mask map, they are exactly the same. So this makes a big difference when we're working. And this is a huge thing that will make your textures and everything feel much better. So the difference, for example, is if we look at, let me see if I'm on the right one. Yeah, this is the way it was rendered when we last saw it. And it looks pretty good. It's not horrible. It's, you know, it's a decent piece, but it looks very flat. Like we were talking about with the video before from Brackeys, that it's very flat and doesn't quite pop yet. There's something missing. And this is where it becomes time to be a good artist and really pay attention and know what you're looking for. So if I go ahead and turn that one off and I see what it looks like when all I did is do two things. Actually, all I did in this case is put the mask map on, and let me turn it off. And that's what it looks like. And then I had to tweak the skybox and the exposure. That's all I changed. And we get a whole different feel of this. Suddenly, and you can look, suddenly it's just this softer, more believable texture. And every detail is not shown up cleanly. Like we can see everything here. It looks very cartoony. And we see our tiling texture. But if you do this, suddenly we still have those subtle details, but they're more subtle. They're less right on your, right in your face. So today, what we're gonna, and here's an example of one of the maps you're gonna make today, or something like this. This is how it comes out with the TGA, and this is what you get when you do it as a PNG, because the PNG channel doesn't actually, it embeds the alpha channel. So if we want to look at the alpha channel, we'd have to do something different. So I like to at least show it, or first pass with the TGAs, because it does a separated alpha channel. Here's the blue, here's the green. In this case, it was this right here. And then here's the red. So what is that we're looking at here? So let me see if I have that render here. It's right. Hold on, this way then. I thought that was right. Okay. It's right here. So this is what we're going to be making. We're making something like this. I don't think you have these textures, but you get the idea. Back to what we were just looking at inside of Unity. So if we go back to, I'm going to close this now. Cancel, just leave it running. Leave my computer really working. And we'll come back to Unity, and we'll see. This is what we're looking at. And I think I've tweaked the lights a little bit since then, but even with the way we've tweaked it, we start to get this. One of the things that we're also going to talk about is the next thing, and that is the reflection probes. Because if we look at this object, it's reflecting the environment around it, including the lights. There's one thing that's wrong with the reflections right now. The specular highlight from the fill lights that I put in to just open it up are still showing up, or doing specular highlights on the globe, but there's a way to get rid of that, and we'll do that at some point. So this is where we're going, and this is the next thing we're going to do. So to do this, it's super easy. So let's talk about how I made it for this environment here, the mask map. So I'm going to come back into Substance here, in this case, and I had to hack it together, really. I didn't really have one because I got, like I said, that model came from Unreal. So we're just going to say clear these all out. And what I had to work with was a couple of little things. I have, like, say, a new material or a new layer, and then I'm going to come in here and see if I brought them, if they're still in here. No. Okay, so I need to bring in the textures that we're using for the main part. All we really have is the opacity, or we have the albedo and the normal map, right? That's all we really have. So we're gonna have to come in here and go to wherever it was that we got those textures. And in this case, I'm gonna go to the textures in Unity just to make my life easy. I'm gonna take the Atlas base, throw it in here, and cancel, let me do it all at once. And the Apple normal, or Atlas normal. Then I'm gonna take both of these by holding Shift and then say define and make it a for this project and say enter. Okay, so I have those two textures. I need to get rid of my baked mesh, obviously, because it's that trim sheet that we worked on. And then I'm going to make sure it's not using that. And then I'm going to do a quick bake just so I have some definitions for when I do this. It's not going to really make a huge difference. It's just something I always do. So I'm going to close that up, and then I'm going to come to my material, and then I'm going to throw the atlas in the base color, and then I'm going to throw the normal into the normal, like that. And right now it's generic, right? I get a generic spec and light map. You know, there's a few things you could try and do. You could take that base color map and bring it to Photoshop and play with it, or you could just say, I'm going to try and see how it looks if I use it as my metal map, or I use it as, because it is a black, it still has black and white, it just ignores the color. So I'll throw it as roughness, and we'll see what we get. And it's too rough, really. Look at that, it's really shiny. It's not what we want. But we could leave that in there. I'm going to leave it in there for now, and I'll show you. Well, I'll put it in the middle and see what it looks like. Okay. So, I don't need the height, but I'm going to turn this up a little bit so we get some metalness to it, but not a lot. And then what I would do is I duplicate this layer and start playing with masking out certain ones and putting on certain ones so they're all a little bit different. I think 90% of what we do is inside of here, and it's got that kind of half shiny, half not shiny feel to it. So we're just going to leave it this way for now, and we're going to export it. So we're going to go to the new exporter, and we're going to look at it, and it's going to say standard, you know, whatever. In my case, it was melon. Well, there's also a new couple in here called standard metallic HD render pipeline. And if you come down to the example, it'll tell you exactly what it's rendering. And look at that right there, mask map. So it's going to render out the mask map for HD render pipeline. I actually have one set up better, so it's like melon. And then I'll go to example and select folder. And then I'm going to take the example here, and I cut off some of the extra stuff, and it's still going to be pings, I'm assuming, because I didn't change them. Yeah, targets, we'll make them pings because I know they work, and we'll say export. Okay, so now I've got it exported. So let's go find it inside of our environment here, or inside of our windows. 1 second. I'll bring it down here. And it's right, well, it should be ping, so I can just say type, and come right here. There's my mask. So the way I do it, like I've told you before, is I just come into here, and I replace it. And actually, it's a different name because I fixed the naming convention, so I'm just going to drag and drop it to here. And there it is, example mask map. That should be it. Yeah, because I renamed it. Okay, so there it is. So now I've got my textures on here, and they don't have a mask map, but watch what happens when I put it on. Not guaranteeing this is going to be great. Suddenly it gets darker. And it didn't change the textures, it just made them more correctly, well, at least what I say is correct at this point, the way I made them. So all we have to do now is go back and tweak. Like I've told you before, you're going to spend a ton of time in here tweaking and playing. So this one you can bring it up, and that's way too high, so we'll just go to like 7. And then this one we'll go to post-process and do something like 2.5, something a little bit less. And you'll see, there you go. So we don't have those really read out textures anymore. They're a lot more believable, a lot more realistic. So I do want to show you something just in case you didn't know. So suppose I want to replace this. We used to be able to do this in a different way. I used to be able just to drop my geo in here, and it would overwrite the old one. Now it duplicates it, and I get it. It's safer and all that stuff. And it used to do the same thing for masks. You can go back and say refresh and stuff, and that's one of the reasons it's best to save into the folder you're going to be finishing in, so it just overwrites it for you and you don't have to worry about making a duplicate. But if you do want to fix it, if you do, let's say you have a chapel, half chapel, just leave that open. I'll lock it, but I want to get rid of this one, and I have a new one that's I want to update. In fact, let's go update it right now. So let's do it in Photoshop. We can even take care of our problems in Photoshop if I just drag it into Photoshop and look at it. Of course, it's got my alpha messed up, but I'm going to come over to my red channel, and I'm going to turn it darker. Actually, I'll make it whiter so it's more metally. There we go. Oh, that was stupid. There we go. Like that. And now I've got a little bit different, so I'm going to save it. It's going to overwrite my old one, but I want to show you something cool. So I can take this, and if I bring it in here, let me show you what happens. I'll drag it in here, and it'll say Mass Map 1. That's not really what I wanted. So what I'll do is I will delete that one, of course, just because it's not being used. And actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete this one. What? You're going to delete it? Yeah, I know, but then you have to drag it back in there, or do you? Bam, it replaces it. Since it's the same name, it'll replace where it's being used. That's a great thing about Unity. So now I've got that new mask in there. It's a lot more harsh in some places. I'm not sure if I like it, but it's something to look into. So that's the first step. That's the first thing we're going over today, and we'll talk more about the next stuff in a little bit.